as a way to kind of get a feel for the room, is anyone here specialized in music at all? Yeah? Okay. Is anyone here specialized in visual arts? Okay. Drama? And then anything else that I didn't mention?
Yes.
Dance? Right. Okay, great.
I'm in arts and artistic. Yes, too.
Oh, very fun. Okay. So, just to give you all a little bit of a sort of preemptive into this, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be going through some exercises that have really worked for me in my experiences. I hope that by the end of this, maybe some of these experiences will have caught your interest and will be something for you to sort of play around with in your own area of work. So, just to let you know a little bit about me, my name is Orlena. I am in my second year of Master's in Music Education at Western University. I am a bit of a choir geek. I really love choir music. I've run a community choir for a couple years, and I've been teaching private lessons in voice, piano, and cello for a few years now. So that's sort of where my background is coming from. So we're going to be talking about performance anxiety through a learning approach called Learning Methods. So I got a little description on the front here. So what is Learning Methods? It's an exploration of learning available to a bunch of different situations. It's relatable to Alexander technique, if anyone here is familiar with that, in the sense that we're navigating the human system. So because we have 10 minutes, we don't have time to dive into that today, but on the back of the handout, there are a bunch of links and resources if that's something that piques your interest at all. The thing that makes Learning Methods unique is that most pedagogical approaches sort of try and fix the symptom, whereas Learning Methods tries to get to the root of the cause of that symptom. So typically this is the kind of work that's taught over like a series of days. So this is an introduction, and I'm using performance anxiety as one aspect of it to sort of introduce you guys to it. So we're going to be looking at what I like to call perspectives or misconceptions. So the first section here on language is more so on how we describe a situation. So typically we tend to think in terms of like wish or should, as in like, I should have had this song from memory by now, or I wish there was more color variety in my painting or something. In other words, we speak in hypotheticals. We don't speak as what is going on in the current present reality. My one professor has a saying that's kind of funny where she says, "Don't shit on yourself." So this section on language sort of outlines where we typically see this with students and ways that we can address this. The biggest thing that I'll advocate for is the power of asking why and what. So if someone says, I'm nervous. What are you nervous of? I'm nervous that I'm not going to be successful. Successful at what? I'm afraid that I'm not going to be a successful painter. Why? Keep asking them all these questions, and it's like those two words are incredibly powerful words that can really help navigate them to identifying what it is that is stressing them out. The second section, the common phrase of not good enough. So this is a pretty big and common thing that we hear pretty often, and it certainly was for me. I lived that life until one day someone asked me, good enough for whom? I hadn't really thought about that before. And now I use that with my students all the time. I had this one cello student, private cello student of mine. She came to lessons and she was kind of flustered, and she's like, oh, sorry, I didn't have time to practice this week. And I said, no, that's fine, how come? She said, well, the only space I can practice cello is in the living room, and my family was in the living room all weekend. I said, well, how come you can't practice when your family's in the living room? She was like, well, because I'm scratching, I sound bad. And I said, to whose criteria do you sound bad? She kind of stopped and realized that nobody in her family had ever said she was bad at cello, but that she had this belief about herself, and that she assumed that everyone else also had this belief. But having this conversation and just kind of going through that made her realize that she was putting all of these negative attributions on herself. And then it allowed us to re-examine our expectations. It was like her fourth lesson or something. She'd been taking lessons for about a month. So I said, do you think that you should expect yourself to be able to play the cello at this point without making any scratches after 4 weeks. And from there, we can kind of go from there and reevaluate. Things get a little more calm once you realize and take a look at the reality of your progress. So going down more, looking at criteria here, it's incredibly helpful when we realize that value or judgment is not associated to the thing or person that is being valued, but rather it tells you about the person doing the evaluation. So for example, and this can be applied to anything. So like if we take the weather, for example, if it's thunder, lightning, raining, all that jazz, you got 3 people. Person A is fired up about this thunderstorm. They're outside, jumping about in the rain, splashing in puddles, having a grand time. Person B is pissed. They are super mad that it's raining. Person 3 is scared. They take shelter, go to a basement. They are afraid of this thunderstorm. Hypothetically, person A maybe comes from an area where there's not a lot of rain. Maybe this is one of the few times that they've seen it, which is why it's so exciting to them. Maybe person B, who's super mad, spent a lot of time doing their hair, and then on their way to whatever event it is that they're going to, their hair is ruined, their clothes are wet, rough day. Maybe person C knows someone who got injured in a thunderstorm and is afraid of the same thing happening to them. So basically, all 3 of these reactions don't tell us anything about the thunderstorm, but it tells us everything about the people who are doing the evaluating of this thunderstorm. So that can be applied to any kind of situation of judgment, and to recognize that it tells you more about the person than it tells you about you, the person who is doing the performance. So turning over to the back, what I've done is I've just given some more like concrete examples or exercises for you all to play around with. So the first one, 4 elements of value assessment, we kind of did that already with the thunderstorm thing. The second one, I always do this with my students. This is especially useful if there's anyone who is interested in sort of student-led teaching or finds it really tricky. So going kind of through the 4 steps here, the biggest thing that I'll point out is number 5. So usually people tend to go through steps 1 to 4, saying, what do you think you did? How do you think you did? What do you maybe want to work on next? Great. And then the teacher will say, thank you for your feedback. I'd say we work on blah, 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 blah. And you don't end up doing anything that the student said. So number 5 is the one that I suggest playing around with the most. It's certainly something that I have the most fun with because it takes a lot of the pressure off me as the teacher. If they don't have an audition or a big performance coming up, then why not do what they want to do and ask them how they think we should go about doing that. So if I have a piano student who says, was really happy with my dynamics, but I noticed that like on the second line there, it's a pretty tricky rhythm, I could work on that. And I'll say, okay, how do you think we should go about that? They'll say, well, how about we loop it 1 measure at a time or something? I'll say, sounds good to me, let's give it a whirl. And then we're collaborating, we're working together. They've got the tools to be their own teacher when I'm not around, which ideally is what I want to be able to do for my students. I want them to not need me, in a sense. And the last one, target practice. This is super useful for students who are feeling frustrated with their progress. So what I will do is typically I'll take paper or whiteboard or something, and I'll draw a target, like a bullseye. And so we'll go through the exercise, we'll do the task, and then I'll have them put an X on the bullseye, how close they feel that they are to reaching the target. So if I had a voice student who wants to work on having higher notes, I'll have her sing a piece that has some higher notes in it, and then I had one student, we did that, and she put an X on like the 4th line or something closest to the center. And she was like I did okay, but like I can't sing high notes. And I said, okay, well look at how close you are to the center of the target. Would it make sense that only singing through this once, that it should not be expected that you would be on the target or even on the line right next to the target? And it just helps kind of center where we are in terms of progress, and it kind of gets them excited because it's just a visual representation that you can only get closer to the target. And that is also a great way to kind of help people center and go over that. So I hope this handout is helpful for you. If you have any questions, I love talking about this stuff, so feel free to stop me in the hallway if you have any questions. So this is my email, but the website underneath is the website for Learning Methods, this type of work. And there's a lot of articles, nice, really easy reads with concrete examples if you guys want to see more of what this kind of work is. Thanks. Did we?
You still have some time if you want to.
Does anybody have any questions, or maybe want to know more about what, maybe more about like what the mind-body sort of stuff is, or anything like that?
Do you have anything or comments or tools about like, coming from like the dance where your body is your instrument and how?
So you would be really interested, actually, the second website, the person who runs that website comes from a dance background.
Okay.
So she talks a lot about mind-body sort of coordination in the sense that it's like, you know, I'm not in my full range or something. Like, I do it when I'm practicing, but when I'm on stage, I'm not in full range. And she'll say, well, what are you thinking about when you're on stage versus what you're thinking about when you're practicing at home? So if they're nervous about something, or they see someone in the audience who's scratching their nose and they're like, that must mean they think I suck, when they're up there, then that would, she says, her big thing is that would make sense, that your body coordinates itself to whatever it is that you're thinking about. And so talking about that with students is another huge part of performance anxiety that I would have talked about had I had another 10 minutes.
The second one, the learning methods one. Is the one you're talking about?
That one
The
and the
Meitner
third
method.
one.
And the third one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
great.